As a member of the opposition, and again, as a Nigerian, those two issues are very grave issues. I believe that the reasons for oversight, especially as members of parliament, is that we shall have oversight over laws, appropriations, and policies. By so, what do I mean? That every law can get better. Every law that is attached to a situation can only get better. And so every election cycle, we find that there are flaws in the electoral process. And that is why there is need to amend the Electoral Act so that our democracy deepens and strengthens. Now, we understand that elections may not necessarily mean democracy, but they are the bedrock upon which our democracies are grown, the right to vote and be voted for. And when we found out that there were certain flaws in the Electoral Act from the last elections, especially as soon as after the elections and people went to court, they found out that because there were policies and not statutes, they could not be relied upon in courts. And so that may have affected the judgments that were given in the case of certain litigations, post-election litigations. And so the National Assembly, in its wisdom, decided that there was need for us to amend the Electoral Act to capture those things that hitherto were policies but could not be tested in the court of law. Now, that was the thinking behind that. Also, to open up the electoral processes in such a way that makes our elections more freer, more fairer, appear more credible to the Nigerian people and indeed to the rest of the world. And then that, of course, creates the legitimacy of the entire democratic process and the government in power. And so the National Assembly went and made amendments, working in concert with the executive, by the way, because the initial provisions or the initial proposals were rejected by the executive arm of government. And we kept toing and froing. Eventually, there was a sit down between the National Assembly, the president, and the INEC. And we came up with what they had suggested be put into the Electoral Act, only because the National Assembly realized that the Nigerian people hungered for a law that would make our elections freer and more credible and deepen our democracy. Because we've constantly called our democracy a fledgling democracy, nascent democracy, but democracy only gets deepened over time. And when that happened, and the president refused to assent to the bill that they had agreed to the provisions, for us it was very shocking. But even more shocking was the fact were the reasons that were due to the non-assent of the bill, that it was too close and the people would not understand. But let us bear in mind that in 2015, President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan signed the Electoral Act 2 days to the elections. So that timing, the excuse of timing, was one that fell flat. Again, they said that it was an international treaty obligation. Now, as the chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, I'm aware that there are 77 treaties that Nigeria has entered into that have not been domesticated. And the Nigerian Constitution is very clear that a treaty should not have the force of law, save to the extent that it has been domesticated by the National Assembly. By so, what am I saying? Is it a right thing that we have those treaties not domesticated? No. But to hide behind an international law that has no bearing and does not come up in any of our statute books, not to assent to a law that you benefited from, and you're supposed to expand the spaces of those under your watch, for us it's very shocking. Of course, you've raised the issues that are very pertinent in these issues, the issues of the card reader, you've raised the issues of collation, you've raised the issues, and again, for us as well, violence in elections have become an issue. Now, the plan of the National Assembly was that once that was assented to, that there would be the electoral offences tribunal, which would disincentivize people from carrying out violence in the electoral processes. Evidently, all of that has fallen flat. Of course, the talk about trader money and spending money and, vote buying and so on and so forth, all those things were contained in the Electoral Act. And so now, it is a great problem that the electoral processes are just not going to be deepened. The space is not going to be opened up. And the concerns and the mischief that the new Electoral Act was supposed to cure are still remain. The status quo remains only because Mr. President refused to assent to the bill. Now, with regards to the Supreme Court, and the head of the Supreme Court, the CJN of Nigeria and the Onogan issue. Of course, the matter is sub judice, so I'm not going to go into that deeply or go into the technicalities of the matter. But let me only say that prior to that the National Assembly was invaded by the executive arm of government. And so you find that there's a systematic tearing down of the democratic institutions of our country. Now, what did the PDP do when the PDP came into power? Of course, we tried to build up all our institutions and strengthen them. The PDP government believed in the independence of these key institutions. And so the NJC was created. The Federal Judicial Council Commission was created, only to give sanctity to that institution. Now, flawed as allegedly flawed as the judiciary may be, the judiciary has managed to stabilize our country, a very, very diverse country. Post-election, Nigeria is the one democracy in Africa that has not had problems after any democratic process. In 2015, there was a seamless movement from one political party to another political party. So we've gone from consolidation elections to transition elections all seamlessly. And at the very heart of that was the judiciary. Now, for you to try to tear down that institution, to desecrate that institution in such a way that makes the Nigerian feel that they cannot trust the institution, trust the judiciary, means that we're tearing down all our institutions. We're tearing down the judiciary. The rule of law was set aside. The Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria was set aside. And what that means, in essence, is that we have broken all the 10 commandments of the democratic processes. And I believe that by doing that, we weakened not only the judiciary, but our democracy as well.